Hey y'all, it's Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I am coming to you with my Jane Austen July TBR. I truly cannot believe that it is time again for Jane Austen July. This year has completely and totally passed me by, and I cannot believe that it is already time for another Jane Austen July. But Jane Austen July is one of my favorite readathons that happens throughout the year, and it's hosted by Katie from Books and Things, Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, and Claudia from Spencer's Library. And I will link to their channels and their announcement videos down below if you have never participated in Jane Austen July before. But Jane Austen July is an event that's been going on for quite a few years now, so I imagine that most of you are pretty familiar with it. Last year, I went into Jane Austen July trying to theme it around reading works that she would have read. And that was a really fun experience, and it was also a really challenging experience, but I really love things that were written during Jane Austen's lifetime. I really love Regency works for the most part, and so it was really fun to have a theme last year and try to read books that I thought Jane Austen might have read herself. And this year, I thought about doing the same thing because my TBR of things that were written around her lifetime only ever grows. And so there are always going to be options I can slide in for reading a work that was written during her lifetime. But I did kind of want to prioritize another prompt this year, similar to the way I did last year. And so last year I focused kind of on the prompt of reading things that were published within her lifetime or around the time that Jane Austen lived. But this year, another of the prompts, which revolves around reading retellings of Jane Austen's works or reading historical fiction set during Jane Austen's lifetime, that's the prompt that I really honed in on this year. And that's the one that really has me excited. I will tell you what is on my list. I only have a couple of things. And so they are for sure the ones that I would like to prioritize and I think that I'll get to this month. I didn't want to make a massive pile of possibilities, though that's always my natural inclination when it comes to Jane Austen July, is just to make a massive pile of possibilities. So I decided to kind of pare down my TBR this year. But before we get into the retellings, I do want to talk about the Jane Austen work that I would like to read this year. One of the prompts is to read one of her 6 main novels, but another of the prompts is to read one of her lesser known works or her shorter works. And that is what I really wanted to do this year because I have finished reading all of Jane Austen's 6 novels, and I'm not always inclined to reread. And so I do have an option for rereading one of her novels, but I really wanted to prioritize this year reading Sanditon. This is my copy of Sanditon. It's in this beautiful Folio Society edition because a colleague of mine gave me a set of Jane Austen's works in this edition, and it's just really beautiful. The illustrations are really beautiful, and I've never had a copy of Sanditon before. And in this, I think there's also, of course, Lady Susan and maybe also the Watsons. Yes, this edition contains Lady Susan, Love and Friendship, the Watsons, Sanditon, Catherine, The History of England, Leslie Castle, Evelyn, Frederick and Elfrida, Jack and Alice, Edgar and Emma, Henry and Eliza, and the 3 sisters. And those are all under minor novels, though that last few that I said, never even heard of some of those. So maybe I'll just work my way through this whole book of her shorter works. I feel like I'm going to be pretty fond of Sanditon, mainly because I have watched the first season of the television show. And this month I would like to watch the 2nd season. The 2nd season, I know for sure, really cannot have anything to do with Jane Austen's actual writing. I think they will have to really move on and make it their own thing just because so many of the cast members didn't return. But I have to wonder how much of the first season really bore any resemblance to what Jane Austen wrote. There was a lot of it that did not seem true to Jane Austen's style, in my opinion. So I'm interested to read this and compare it to my experience watching the show. But I really love the show. I mean, just love the show. It's so dreamy. It's at a seaside town, which just feels very summery and perfect for Jane Austen July. And so Sanditon is the main work of Jane Austen's that I would like to read this month. But if I have the time and the opportunity, and I want to do it, The only book of hers that I have not reread or even read for the first time in the past 5 years is Northanger Abbey. I have actually only read Northanger Abbey one time, and that was when I was very young. I was either a preteen or a very young teenager. It was the first work of hers I read, and it was, at the time, the only work of hers I enjoyed. I really did not care for Pride and Prejudice when I was younger, and I still, to some extent, don't. But I've always had a fondness for Northanger Abbey because it was the first, and it was not only the first of her novels that I read, it may actually have been just one of the first experiences that I had reading classic literature on my own, not in a classroom setting. And so I have a fondness for it, and I also just love Gothic novels. So I really love what she's poking fun at here. I would love to reread this because it is very, very short, but I've also always been kind of nervous about rereading it because I wonder if the experience that I had when I was younger will be replicated now, or if Northanger Abbey will fall in my ranking. And for me with Jane Austen, it's an interesting thing because on a technical level, there is a way I would rate her books. But after I spend some time away from her books, I find that my fondness for them grows a little bit. So I'm just going to be interested to see how this goes as an experiment in terms of rereading. So I really do hope that I get to this month, but I wanted to read something by Jane Austen that I had never read before. And so I'm going to prioritize Sanditon, but this is definitely up on the docket. I would love to reread this. Because I sat down to film, I know I say this all the time, but because I sat down to film, the clouds rolled in. So that's what's happened if the quality of my footage has gone down. But in terms of the retellings that I want to read this year, I have 2 I definitely want to add to this. If I can read more than 2, I would love to, but these 2 have been on my radar for a little while now. And one of them is Jane Fairfax by Joan Aiken. And when I said that Emma was my favorite Jane Austen a couple of years ago, and when I read Emma for the first time, I filmed a vlog around it. And Jane is the character that I am actually most fascinated by in Emma, and I'm really fascinated by the story of her and Frank Churchill. And so I wanted a retelling that focused entirely on her and him. And several of y'all recommended this to me, and I have seen Katie from Books and Things recommend this. So I'm really excited about this one. I feel like this will definitely be the big success of the month. But if you have any other recommendations that have to do with Jane Fairfax, let me know. Please let me know because I love her. They are the characters that I think I am most fascinated by in Jane Austen, which is a strange thing to say, but I am really, really fascinated by the side stories in Emma almost more than the main plot. The reason Emma is my favorite is that I like everything going on. I'm not bored by any of the plot lines. I think everything is engaging, and I think everything could have been its own story. So I definitely think this is a great one for a retelling. The other retelling that I am really excited about is The Year in Between by Christina Morland. And this has been on my radar only for about a week, actually, because I saw Kate Howe mention this in her Jane Austen July TBR. And this apparently focuses on that year that is kind of scanned over in Sense and Sensibility. I won't say where it is in the book in case you've not read Sense and Sensibility, but towards the end there is like this year time jump, and this book is apparently filling in those gaps, and I am really excited about it. Sense and Sensibility is the book that I thought I liked the least of Jane Austen's, but it is my favorite of hers in adaptations. And so I think my love for the adaptations of Sense and Sensibility will possibly spill over to a retelling. I am so excited about this one. I mean, really excited, and I just love that the cover looks like a Penguin classic. I just think that is so cheeky and fun. So this is one that I'm excited about. In general, down below, I would just love to hear what your favorite retelling is of a Jane Austen work. And it can be something that is set during the time of the actual novel. That's kind of what I'm focusing on this year, but I'm interested in any and all retellings. So I would love to hear your suggestions down below. I have at least 100 things on my TBR that are from the time period in which Jane Austen was either living or writing. And I just love things that were written at this time period. Late 18th, early 19th century is such a sweet spot for me in terms of literature. And so I have just 100 things that could possibly go for this prompt. This year, I decided I wanted to read Melmoth the Wanderer by Charles Maturin. This was published in 1820, so it's kind of stretching it. But I think this will be an interesting one. If I get to reread Northanger Abbey, I wanted the other classic that I picked up for the month to be a Gothic novel, and I really just wanted to interrogate themes. And so I think this will be an interesting one. This is one I've never read before. I've heard it's absolutely terrifying, but I've also heard that it's just a lot of fun, and that tends to be how I feel about Gothic novels. I love them. And so this is one that has been on my radar for a very long time. I'm excited to get this one started, but this is essentially just a placeholder. I may go with this one. I may decide to go with something else that's on my TBR. In terms of watching adaptations, I am going to try the second season of Sanditon. As I said, Sanditon was like a weird case. It was canceled after the first season, and it's been years later that apparently its popularity here in the States got it renewed. And of course, that means that the large majority of the cast moved on and got other jobs. And so I know that there's going to be a mix-up here in the second season, especially in terms of romantic heroes and villains. And I'm looking forward to it. I don't know whether or not this will bear any sort of resemblance to the Sanditon that Jane Austen wrote. But again, as I said earlier, I don't know how much the first season resembled what she wrote. But I thoroughly enjoyed the first season, so I'm definitely gonna watch the second season. And I'm also definitely gonna watch the new adaptation of Persuasion with Dakota Johnson and Henry Golding. I know that the trailer looked weird. I accept it. There were things that really bothered me. I don't like anachronistic language. I think I've told y'all that before, but I really don't like that she used the word ex in the trailer. We're worse than exes, we're friends. What? And I also think it's going to be strange because I view Persuasion as the most serious of Jane Austen's works, and I don't know that the tone of the film fits with what I feel like the tone of the book was. There was kind of a melancholy to the book that I really liked. And so I'm curious about this, but the cast is so good. It's so good that I can't pass it over. I love Dakota Johnson, and I love Henry Golding. Henry Golding is like the most handsome actor we have working today, and I want him in more period pieces. So I'm going to support this just in the hopes that he will then take more jobs in period pieces. But I'm not going to judge it on the trailer. I'm going to watch the film, and I'll let it speak for itself. Last but not least, last Jane Austen July, I picked up Tea with Jane Austen, recipes inspired by her novels and letters, and I would really like to cook a few things out of this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I am really, really excited, particularly about these scones, but look at this buttered apple tart. Doesn't that look delicious? And so I really, of course, feel like I need to make scones. Like, it's Jane Austen. I feel like we need scones. And I think that the recipe seems pretty straightforward. So there are a lot of recipes in here that I'm interested in trying. I thought I would try out a couple this month and share them with y'all. That is my small and also very tentative Jane Austen July. I'm going to be flexible and trade things out on this TBR if I feel the need to, but I do feel right now like I'm pretty locked in. And so I'm really excited about Jane Austen July this year. This is one of my favorite events of the year in terms of BookTube, and I'm so excited. I would love to know down below if you have read any of my choices, and I would love to know what's on your TBR for Jane Austen July this year. But that's going to be all for me today. I hope you're all having a great week. Happy reading. Happy Jane Austen July. Goodbye.